Hi and welcome. My name's Rob Scott from UC today, and in this UC Summit session, we're going to be talking about moving to CCaaS and beyond. So to help explore this topic, I'm joined by Avaya and I'm joined by Voxbone, which is now part of Bandwidth. Welcome, Mehmet and Jonathan.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks for joining me today. Appreciate you taking some time out to join us at UC Summit. Today's topic is moving to CCaaS and beyond. It's been an interesting year for most organizations, the pandemic in 2020 and now the kind of onlook to 2021. Everyone's talking about CCaaS. It's big right now, isn't it? And I really wanted to kind of just take us through a few questions to kind of isolate the big benefits of moving to CCaaS and what's beyond CCaaS as well. So before we get going, though, how about we just do a quick round of introductions? Mehmet, would you like to go first?
Hi, my name is Mehmet Hussain. I'm the Technical Design Authority here at Voxbone. Voxbone were recently acquired by Bandwidth, a large US carrier. We at Voxbone were a large international SIP voice carrier. We've got presence and are able to offer local service in 34 plus countries around the world. We connect to various large enterprises and large CCaaS, UCaaS, CPaaS providers in the industry. We're quite prevalent in the market, but not well known. So you might not have heard of us, but you've probably used the service using a part of our network.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mehmet. Very warm welcome. And Jonathan?
Yeah, hi, Rob. So my name's Jonathan Ma, and I'm working for Avaya UK, heading up our cloud and technology specialists, supporting Avaya's UK customers in both our customer experience and employee experience product and solution ranges across a broad range of industries, both directly and through our partner network and our technology partners as well.
Great. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay, so to kick off, I'd like to maybe go to Mehmet first of all. What is the current state of customer experience, and really how did the pandemic affect end customer organizations?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? And some of you might be able to hear my baby daughter singing in the background. So customer experience, it was massively impacted by the pandemic. It very quickly demonstrated that many organizations running large contact centers were not prepared to move to a distributed employee model. They weren't ready to house all of their employees in their homes and have people taking calls on domestic internet connections over soft phones. That, as you said, only 20% of organizations had actually done this. The rest of them got caught off guard. What we saw is a massive spike in demand for companies looking to do this transition really, really quickly just to maintain a level of customer experience. We even saw in the industry certain large names closing down their contact centers, favoring the emails and instant messaging channels just so that they could process the sheer volume of interactions they were getting. Because not only were the contact centers themselves affected, but the services, the contact centers they were backing up. So there were massive rafts of holiday cancellations and all sorts of contact centers were being hit off the hook. I mean, DIY took a massive spike in the pandemic because people had loads of free time. So places like kitchen ordering websites took a massive hit on their contact centers. I was one of the customers impacted by that myself. So we've seen customer experience massively change over the last year. And it's been a positive change, but initially it was a scrabble to react.
Yeah, indeed. It seems a logical move to move to CCaaS or cloud contact center. Jonathan, from your perspective, being a provider of cloud contact center solutions, what's it been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, normally with businesses, there's a technology cycle. People look to adopt new technologies, they look to assess them and bring them to market. But COVID was something that nobody really planned for, right? So everybody had to react and respond very quickly. And for a lot of businesses, they had to change their whole business model. New working practices, new processes, the whole way they engage with their customers changed. And on the other side as well, one of the things that's coming out in a lot of studies now is that customers during COVID, during 2020, actually started to become a little bit more demanding as well, right? Customers were more selective, less tolerant, I think, of bad customer experience, and even with the pandemic. And the people who were able to respond to that the best, and the businesses that could maintain a good customer experience through that, were the ones that kind of cope well. And I think, showing empathy and empathy about the way that customers wanted to engage and wanted to speak was helpful in that. And I got a bit of a wake up call myself, actually, when I called a bank or called my bank about something, expecting a very quick service and expecting everything as it was before, because they're a bank, right? That's what they do. And they had an announcement when you called them that said, be aware that our agents are working from home and there may be children, maybe pets in the background, and the lights might go off. But it just, it's things like that just make you realize that everybody was going through this, right? And it made you kind of stop and think for a second that, well, this impacts the company as much as it impacts me. And a lot of individuals, customers, have suffered from the isolation of being at home. And at the same time, staff, and in particular in contact center agents, have had to adjust to that as well in working from home. And that's been the biggest change, right? This has really driven a technology change on the basis of a change in business and society that nobody planned for. And the question of how you address that quickly, I guess, is really how we get to CCaaS.
Jonathan, would you say that the growth or the change or the progression in the market that we've seen is probably what we would have seen over the next 3-4 years if the pandemic hadn't happened, just accelerated into a period of about a year?
To some extent, yes. I think that there's kind of two impacts of that. One of which is some of those programs have been accelerated. Some programs have been dropped by customers altogether because it shifted priorities, right? So now the most important thing is serving customers in changing times, not whatever they thought was a priority 6 or 12 months ago.
So the new initiatives have been dropped, but there's been a much more focus on, right, we've got a problem, let's all hands
exactly,
to solve this.
And a lot of organisations as well. A lot of them are risk adverse, and what's happened with COVID is that's changed their view of that kind of risk calculation. Because now I think, especially organisations that were a little bit reticent to go to a cloud solution, that's now not the biggest risk to their business. The biggest risk to their business is no longer being competitive or relevant in the market, and that's been a real driver for change.
Yeah, it's an interesting paradigm. You mentioned that a moment ago, Jonathan, where we're in a world that's been massively disrupted. We don't know what's around the corner. It's very unpredictable, but the customer has less tolerance and is growing, less and less tolerant to poor customer experience. So certainly it plays into the hands of contact center in the cloud, doesn't it? So let's talk about the kind of challenges that organizations are facing. So Jonathan, really to you on this one, if you can. Infrastructure is what you do. So what are those challenges in this new year for organizations looking at their customer experience?
So, I think probably the first and foremost, and we just touched on that before, right? So businesses are now having to effectively provide the same levels of service, but in many cases with less staff, and some industries have been very heavily impacted because of the nature of their business. Things like travel and hospitality, for example, across the board have had massive staff and cost reductions. And even those that haven't now have a larger proportion of their staff working from home, right? And particularly when you look at large enterprises, a lot of them were kind of built around, integrated, high capacity, highly resilient IT systems on the basis of everybody working in an office location. They had large contact center premise. They were very much built around those teams being in those premise and, being able to share the knowledge in a very physical way. And all that has changed. So now what we're seeing is we're kind of seeing things kind of being, I guess, decentralized. And that traditional model of building an on-premise solution to service offices and all of the plumbing and all of the infrastructure, everything being around that, is kind of unraveled quite quickly for some businesses as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And CCaaS really isn't just a cloud deployment, is it? It's actually much more than that in terms of capability as well. So there's much more beyond CCaaS as well once you get there. Mehmet, what's your perspective on things?
Yeah, I agree with what Jonathan has been saying. We've seen some of the largest organizations who have had slightly older, more legacy type deployments where they've, again, centralized around one physical location where they're sharing knowledge and solving problems. We are seeing those organizations which operate on an international scale suddenly looking at joining together these disparate but very large individual deployments into a cloud-first, singular sort of modularized / semi-centralized / hybrid / local type deployment for lots of different user groups in lots of different locations. And what we're seeing as we're being an international SIP provider is organizations moving away from single large deployments of infrastructure, still wanting to maintain a level of control, but deploying in much smaller availability zones in public cloud infrastructures with microservices and much smaller architectural complexities, relying a lot more on internet breakouts and looking, I mean, at least from our perspective, looking for international origination and termination providers that can offer a single contract across multiple markets, but actually serve 15, 16, 17, 30 different locations out of one single core, all at the same time, homogenizing services and consumption. So we're seeing large international organizations being forced on the route that they knew they would have to do at some point, but really weren't too keen on doing it because it was going to be hard. So we're seeing a lot of organizations leaning on us for our expertise to navigate them through this really short timeline that they need to react to.
Yeah, super. So that's a nice segue into my next question, really, and maybe Mehmet, you can answer this one too. It's let's talk about benefits here of moving to CCaaS and beyond CCaaS, because there's much more to CCaaS than just where it's deployed, isn't there? So, Mehmet, tell us, really just simplify what you just said a little bit around the kind of business benefits and why organizations should consider moving to CCaaS.
I mean, I think this harks back to the more general paradigm of why should an organization move towards the cloud? And the inherent simple answer to that is flexibility. You can apply that flexibility argument to many aspects of what these services do. So you could be saying the flexibility to move your location of your virtual infrastructure around the world to service your customer base or service where your employees are. Or you could be talking about the flexibility to scale up and shrink down depending on market demand and the market need. There are many aspects to it, but it is all centered around the flexibility to react to an otherwise unpredictable market. We've just gone through a period of time which nobody could have predicted. The way that we are reacting to it is still being defined, and it's going to be incredibly important for organizations to insulate themselves against other behavioral challenges that they will encounter and remain flexible and have a flexible approach to all of it. So I think that's the driver behind it, and that the largest blocker behind adopting that flexibility is you basically have to start from scratch, but you only have to do it once. Once you've made the transition towards cloud first operations, you've made that leap. You can then start moving at light speed.
Great. And Jonathan, what's it like moving to CCaaS from on-prem, and what are the big benefits when you get there?
We see a lot of organisations actually that actually some of them they really can't make that move, and some of them will remain on premise. But I think all organisations have had before the pandemic some plans to move at least some workloads into a cloud or a CCaaS environment. In particular, things like digital channels, right? And one of the things that's accelerated that due to COVID through 2020 is the fact that, as I said before, some organizations are very impacted by staffing. And so the enablement of digital channels and more kind of different ways of serving customers is a way of doing that with less resources and introducing things like automation to make that more effective still and try and reduce the cost of service whilst still maintaining the quality, right? So we're actually seeing some customers that will remain with an on-premise model, but will look to overlay in a hybrid model some of those digital services and digital interactions. In addition as well, right, and we always say this, but the key to keeping customers happy is keeping the staff happy. And now that we have the home working scenario, that's become a little bit more challenging from a technology perspective for call centers everywhere. We've now got a distributed model. We've got people working from home. We still need to, give those agents and give those customer service people the tools and the knowledge they need to be able to do their job effectively and quickly. And also we need to be able to kind of still measure the performance and measure issues and look to actually manage those people in a remote environment. And they're two specific areas that we see as real drivers towards CCaaS outside of all of the benefits we discussed about scalability and about particularly speed to respond and be able to respond to changes in market and demand.
Jonathan, you mentioned automation I mean, that's a key point for us as well, right? Would you say that APIs are vital for a CCaaS provider to provide so that they can join together with all these other cloud applications, or is it not at the forefront of what people are looking for just yet?
So it is one of the key topics, and in particular where people have complex environments, which before was one of the main reasons not to move away from an on-premise model because of the broader ecosystem, right? So it's not just about the platform; it's about all of the different applications and knowledge you plug into that. And moving to a CCaaS model with APIs is a way of maintaining that, and also link out to other applications and the outside world. So it is something that comes up, and it is a driver towards CCaaS as well.
Great. Some really good points made there. Thank you. So finally, my last question over to you, Jonathan, for this one. What should organizations be looking for in a CCaaS provider? What are the kind of telltale signs that are going to be a top quality provider for their organization?
Well, I think in terms of requirements around CCaaS, and it's first and foremost, if an organization is looking to CCaaS and looking to a CCaaS provider, all of the things that are important before in maintaining your customer experience is still true, right? Ultimately, the end goal of any kind of contact center environment is to maintain and improve customer experience and customer service. So that should be front of mind, and anything that enables that is going to be key to that decision. Also around, if we look at the availability of that, right, as well. So any calls or any contacts that come into the organization, they have to be answered and addressed. If you start to have, if they're not answered, if they're dropped, if they just go out to a queue forever, that's ultimately going to lead to a bad customer experience as well. So I think those two things are probably first and foremost. But also CCaaS is an enabler as well for different commercial models that I touched on before, right? And I think a scalable commercial model that actually reflects the commercial metrics, cost and revenue of the business is key as well. And that allows you then to be able to take the technology scaling and apply that in a way that scales commercially as the business changes and scales. And one last thing I'll mention before I throw over to Matt for his view on this as well is, again, in a CCaaS model, it is important to maintain the MI and the business metric reporting, because ultimately that will tell you how successful you are in terms of providing and maintaining that customer service, net promoter score, et cetera. And the knowledge management and providing all the tools the agents need to be able to be effective in the new reality in this remote working environment we're in.
Thank you very much for some really good points there as well. Mehmet, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my perspective is coming from a different angle, right? I'm looking at this from the international supply, like the utility point of view. What do we see from that perspective? What does a CCaaS provider need to provide from our perspective to enable good customer experience? And what we've seen, the largest challenge for enterprises and for MSPs and resellers facing international expansion, which is where the crux of this sort of, it makes a lot of friction, is regulations. Every country has got a differing set of telecoms regulations pertaining to the electronic communication services you might be consuming. You need to make sure that whichever CCaaS provider you go with, whichever your route is, if it's an international approach that you're taking, you need to make sure that your providers are regulatory compliant and can help you as an enterprise navigate through whatever these regulatory requirements are. So, for example, there are certain data collection requirements in certain countries to obtain number types. That sort of information hasn't traditionally been represented directly to the enterprise. It's been dealt with by the reseller in between. Now that paradigm is shifting because regulations are tightening massively. Because of our direct regulatory relationships, we're at the forefront of that. We've seen multiple countries last year pivot on their regulatory position, imposing much more stringent data collection requirements on carriers and electronic communication providers and CCaaS providers. So being aware of that is massive. And also one of Jonathan's points about monitoring that service. So how can you be sure that you're delivering consistent, good quality customer experience above and beyond what the customers are saying on the net promoter scores and things like that? So it all might be well and good, a customer saying this was bad. But if you can say, okay, the customer rated this call bad, but we can see that the carrier leg of this call was really bad, then immediately you've got something you can jump on and fix and improve that customer experience that you otherwise wouldn't have had visibility of before. So that data needs to be given to you right from the carrier level. So, I mean, obviously, I'm relating this back to something that we do. We allow our customers to see the legs of these calls that we are receiving and terminating between us and our in-country partners and us and the customer, reflecting all sorts of quality metrics about it that can be pulled into larger management information platforms to manage these contact center environments where customer experience is so key.
Yeah, absolutely. So much to explore, and there's lots more to explore at UC Summit this year. But gents, thank you very much for your time today. It's been really great to see you.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. It's been great. Thanks, Jonathan.
Cheers, man.
And that's it from us. If you've enjoyed today's show, please do give us a like or share it on social. It's always appreciated. I'm Rob Scott from UC Today. Thanks for watching.